So today we're going to be going over again a high level, all of Preseem, and then the new RF features. I'm going to go through the overview of Preseem, and then Jeremy's going to follow up afterwards with a demo of the new RF analysis features. Rough agenda. I guess I talked a little bit of this already. Talk about quality of experience as a whole. Introduce Preseem, some of the problems we solve, our process that we help our customers improve the quality in their network and why we do that. High-level feature areas, and then the demo. So Preseem gives you the tools to understand and optimize the quality of experience delivered by your network. As a company, our goal is to help local and regional internet providers be successful. And we think the best way to do that is to give you the tools to deliver a great customer experience. And that's really kind of everything that we do is trying to understand across all access technologies and especially RF, the customer experience and give you the tools to make that better. So we think that the quality of experience has a few big pieces that are required for a complete quality of experience solution. I'm just going to talk about each of these briefly, and then we'll go in a little bit deeper in subsequent slides. The first is you need to have the ability to really measure the subscriber experience in a way that's reflective of the actual experience. Traditional network monitoring tools, things that do like ICMP ping, SNMP, those are all great. You need that like network monitoring because you're monitoring the individual network elements, but that actually tells you very little about the service that's delivered to the customer. So instead of that approach, we actually extract quality metrics directly from subscriber traffic. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. But it also requires a deep understanding of the underlying access network. Having quality metrics is great, but if you can't tie it back to something actionable, like this particular access point has problems or this particular tower is overloaded, it's just not nearly as useful. So that was one of the first things that we did is we tied all of our quality metrics to the infrastructure topology. And what we're really going to go into in more detail in this session is the new RF analysis features where you can kind of go one layer deeper and really understand what's happening between every AP and every CPE radio in your network and identify the ones that you need to address to deliver a good experience. And then the third piece is the traffic management and shaping. The approach that we take to this is we optimize for latency instead of just throughput. Again, we'll go into this in more detail later, but the high level here is latency is really how people perceive the interactivity of the network, and it's in many ways more important than raw throughput. But I will call it like traffic management is kind of one piece of quality of experience. If an underlying access point or backhaul or something is overloaded, it doesn't matter how smart you are picking the packets to deliver downstream. It's good. They're going to queue. They're going to drop at that point. So it's really, we can make a big difference in the overall quality once the network is relatively clean, but you really need those other pieces in order to get it to the point the traffic management is going to make that extra quality level on top of that. So again, Preseem gives you the tools to understand and proactively improve your subscribers' quality of experience. We do that by measuring, analyzing, and improving the quality of experience. And the goals for that and the benefits for that is help you to reduce churn. Once you can proactively find the areas of the network that are delivering a bad experience, you can get out in front of it, make sure that you fix it before customers have problems. Obviously, that's great. They're not going to call. They're not going to complain. We can also, with the optimization, fix things like the My Internet or slow calls where people complain when their network's busy. The internet feels slow. We can also help you reduce your support costs. Obviously, if you're proactive and you're managing the network in a way that everyone's having a good experience, you're just going to get fewer support calls. But the ones that do still come in, our tools can help you more quickly get to root cause. Understand if it's in the home, if it's in the network, if it's in a backhaul, what the individual particular circumstances are there. We can also help you make your team more productive. This is really where the new RF features that we're going to talk about today shine. We're able to boil down a lot of very complex knowledge, especially in the RF domain, into a few scores that help non-technical staff make a really good decision as to whether the problem is an RF issue, like in the network, versus an in-home problem versus a backhaul or something else. And we also can you leverage this to free up your experts as well. Like your RF experts today are probably spending a lot of time looking at the vendor tools, looking in Preseem, looking in maybe an NMS and trying to correlate in their head what's going on to identify where the problems are in the network. And the new scores we're going to talk about really make that much, much faster. So your RF experts can be out fixing things instead of staring and comparing and trying to figure out where the problems actually are. We can help you make your ISP more competitive by offering higher latency, or sorry, lower latency, higher bandwidth plans. And we'll touch on that in a minute. And lastly, optimizing for network ROI. Every ISP, you want to be in this great spot where your equipment is heavily loaded, you've got lots of subscribers on it, but it's not so heavily loaded that you're delivering a poor experience. And the new scoring system that we've put in place is designed to help you get to that point where you're kind of in that Goldilocks zone of not too busy, but not too unbusy either. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so for those of you who aren't Preseem customers, this is the high-level process of what it usually looks like to engage with Preseem. We think of this as kind of the Preseem QoE improvement process. Essentially, we start with integrating into the network. So we need to get information like the list of access points, routers, switches, network inventory, subscriber information. Typically, we do that by reaching out to a billing system, for example. We also need to deploy two components. We need to deploy the polar, which reaches out to the rest of the network, extracts information from access points and CPE radios, helps us build a topology. And we need to deploy the inline network element, which is responsible for measuring the traffic and performing the QoE optimized plan enforcement as well. Typically, once all this is going, we'll identify a few problems in the network. Could be overloaded backhauls. We'll talk about overloaded APs. We'll talk about a few examples in a second. Generally, it's a good idea to fix some of the worst examples there, because ultimately, if those network elements are overloaded, the optimization we do can't do its job if those elements are already dropping packets. But once that's out of the way, then we turn on the traffic optimization. This is again where we're going to optimize the customer's delivery so they get a good low latency experience all the time. This is really important from most applications. Most applications today are not bandwidth intensive. They really, really matter for latency, or really, really care about latency. And from there, it typically goes into this ongoing loop, this improvement loop of identifying problems in the network with our tools, that are areas that are delivering a poor quality of experience or individual subscribers, fix them and repeat over time, and continually drive the network to deliver a better and better experience over time. There's also this box in the bottom, which is respond. That's when you do get problems or you do have complaints from customers, or you do have problems you need to investigate. You can use our tools to more quickly get to root cause on those. So again, this is just a really high level picture of what is kind of you can expect to happen if you engage with Preseem and bring Preseem into your network. So we mentioned earlier about measuring traffic and how it needs to be measured in a way that's measuring subscriber experience, and it needs to be measured in a way that's reflective of the actual subscriber experience. Network monitoring tools, ICMP, ping, SNMP, all that stuff, they're really targeting monitoring individual network elements. They don't really tell you very much at all about the delivered service. So the approach we take instead is we measure this directly from the subscriber traffic. So as the subscriber's traffic is passing through our box, we extract out latency loss, retransmissions, and all these key kind of network level quality indicators, and we tie those back to individual subscribers and the topology. This means that we can identify which parts of the network are delivering a bad experience from really the same kind of perspective of the overall customer. And two things are really cool about this. One is we don't inject any traffic. We're doing this by monitoring the actual packets that are delivering the service to the customer. And second, you get visibility all the way right down to the end, because it doesn't matter where the packets are dropped. If they're dropped, in the customer's home, or they're dropped at an intermediate backhaul, we still see those symptoms of poor quality. So you can think of this as essentially looking for overall symptoms of problems, not individual problems. And really, we think that this kind of extracting it from the subscriber's traffic flow is really the only way that you can get a real picture of the customer experience. Again, network monitoring tools just aren't going to do that. Once we have this information in place, all of the subscriber traffic metrics mapped to topology, typically we're going to see a few things. We're going to see overloaded backhauls, overloaded APs, poorly performing access points, poor APs. We have poor connections between APs and CPE radios, in-home Wi-Fi problems, but we'll also typically see some interesting things as well, things like overloaded routers, bad optical cables. We've seen bonded links that are misconfigured, that are reordering packets. And again, what this really comes down to here is we're looking for symptoms of any problem that's causing a bad QoE, not individual problems, which really makes it very powerful for understanding the overall quality of experience delivered in the network. So on top of the subscriber level quality of experience, we also extract a lot of information from the network and we roll that up into the UI and into our data models as well. So we collect this information from access points and CPU radios, and we pull that into the UI. But what's neat, so the information we collect is basically all the things you'd expect for an access point, and on the RF level, RSSI, modulation, throughput, packets, all that kind of stuff. But what's neat here is we actually normalize this across vendors. So you'll have in Preseem all of the RF information you need to debug quality problems for Cambium and Ubiquity, all in one spot without having to go out to separate tools or train your team to go to separate tools or even give access to those other tools to your individual team members. The use cases for this are things like customer calls in, they say their internet's been poor for the last 2 weeks. Well, you've got 2 years of metric history here to look and see what has the RF conditions been like for that customer over the last, in this example case, 2 weeks. Has there been a material change? If there hasn't, then perhaps the problem is actually not your network. Maybe it's a problem in the house, for example, as a way to kind of isolate. And really, a lot of this history comes down to that. Like once you know when something happened, you can often figure out why it happened. It's really powerful in that way. Other use cases we've heard for this is things like auditing all of the installs, make sure they're all meeting particular standards. Also, you could compare installers as well. Like, is a typical installer doing a good job against your overall standard? So with that information, the subscriber quality of experience information and the underlying information we pull from the access points and the CPE radios, we use that to build a data model internally of the expected behavior of all of this equipment. And it's expected in the sense that it's what was observed across our entire customer base. So if you're familiar with our fixed wireless report, which we publish twice a year, where we've done for the last few years, we've shown real world performance numbers for most of the common access points. You could think of this as taking that data pool and now pulling it inside of Perseem. And once we're able to build this representation of what that access point at a given configuration should be capable of, we can use that to create scores to tell you where in your network you have individual problems. So on CPU radios, we've just launched these two new scores. The RF score summarizes all the complex RF behavior, again, modulation, signal strengths, all that stuff into a single number. So you can very quickly find which is the worst RF connection in your entire network just by sorting a column. The screenshot there is a little small, but that last column is the RF score sorted in that particular network. And again, this accomplishes this without having to kind of stare and compare and look at a whole bunch of different metrics. It just boils it all down into one number. And then the business value score is a layer on top of this. So what it does is it combines the RF score with the behavior of an individual customer. And if you think about your network in terms of airtime, which is really what fixed wireless providers sell, not bandwidth, you want to, any subscriber that has poor RF, but they also are a heavy user, they're the ones that are taking the airtime on your access points. They're the ones that are doing the most damage from the perspective of taking airtime from other customers and reducing the overall capacity of the AP. And the business value score allows you to immediately identify them. So looking for a poor business value score, you're going to know exactly who do I need to fix on a given access point to free up capacity on that access point, and make all the other customers happy, or free up capacity to add new subscribers. So the couple of use cases there, figure out which CPU radios and subscribers you need to fix again to add capacity. Or if you want to be proactive, you can operate just on the RF score as well. And maybe you have a truck roll into an area and you could look and see what other people have poor RF scores in that area. Go fix one of them in a proactive sense while you're there so that they don't become someone that's hitting the business value score problem later. And again, the information here, that the data that builds this is collected behavioral data across all of our customer base. It's not based on static thresholds or marketing numbers from an individual access point vendor. It's all real world data, and I think much more useful because that's what it is. So those are CPE radio scores, and this is something Jeremy's going to go into in the demo in just a few minutes. Access point scores, there's two of them as well. There's an RF score, which again summarizes the overall RF conditions for the whole access point. So if you want to find which access point has the worst RF, simply sort a column, go look at it over there. And then the health score is going to identify access points that are overloaded. Could be a combination of poor RF driving that, or maybe too many subscribers. A few different things figure into that. But again, those are the APs that you're going to want to look at to maybe add capacity, switch to a newer model, split, or maybe at some cases move subscribers somewhere else if you can't get their individual connections up to a high enough quality level for a given access point. And again, same things. Sort the column, very simple, just in the AP list, and all entirely based on the AP, the real world data we collect across our customers. My personal favorite thing that we've done lately is the access point subscriber capacity number. And this again flows from this giant data pool we have of real world performance data for all of this equipment. Essentially, what we do here is we take the behavior of subscribers in your network, so typical usage, and then we take our model for a given access point with its current RF conditions and current load of subscribers and what it should be capable of across all our customers. And we basically convert all of that complexity into a simple number, which is the number of subscribers that access point should be able to handle. And then we present that as a positive negative. So if you have a negative number, you have too many subscribers on the access point based on, again, the data we see across all of our customers. Or if you have a positive number, then you have a whole bunch of capacity available, essentially. So this is really cool. Like, what's great about this is it takes something so complicated like airtime and modulations and subscriber behavior and boils that down to a number that really anybody in the organization can understand. You could imagine your marketing team driving campaigns into an area where you have subscriber capacity versus an area where the APs are overloaded, and adding subscribers is going to cause problems. So those features are all finding problems, like the tools to help you identify the quality of experience problems in the network. The last two things I want to touch on are more on the improving and the optimization side of things. I mentioned earlier that latency is key, and it really, really is. Most applications now, and it's not entirely universal, but it's really most. If you think about web browsing, gaming, even this webinar we're on right now, they typically care as much or more about latency than they care about throughput after you get past this, a certain threshold of 15, 20 megs, just statistically. And because most solutions are optimized to focus on only throughput, which comes often, it can come at the expense of latency, we end up in these situations like if you've ever been using an internet connection and it gets really slow as it gets near capacity, that's because they're kind of sort of, in a simple sense, over optimizing for bandwidth. And this happens when you have a hop in the network that is queuing up packets. So if you have an overloaded access point, this is probably, without active management to make it better, this is probably the most common case. If you have an overloaded access point, those packets are going to queue up there. They're going to all come in behind each other, which introduces latency, and eventually they're going to introduce drops, and that's where you get that really kind of exponential decay in performance. That's exactly where it comes from. It's a phenomenon called buffer bloat. So what we do instead is we leverage new AQM techniques, which have come out in the last few years, which are designed to keep that latency really low, even under load. Essentially, we give every subscriber a huge number of virtual queues. We divide their traffic across that. We dynamically determine which flows are interactive based on the behavior of the flow, not based on application identification and rules and stuff like that. And then while we're enforcing the plan rate, then we're able to deliver the right packets to give a good experience at all times. You can see a little example there on the side that's showing a microtick simple queue as an enforcement technique. This was, I think, a 4 or 5 meg plan, so a little small, but gets the point across. So that's microtick shaper doing the plan enforcement on a fully loaded link, right? Somebody doing a big download. And then when we turn our plan enforcement on, you can see a very dramatic difference in latency. And again, that's entirely down to providing that isolation between the flows. And I guess probably the key takeaway for this is speed tests matter. Like, people do run speed tests and they want to know they're getting their speed, but on an daily basis, as they're using the internet, they really do feel latency. We have customers that say things like a 10 meg plan in Preseem feels like a 20 meg plan, just by this optimization of focusing on latency, not entirely throughput. And lastly, before we go into a demo, the Preseem Blue. So all of these scores that we've introduced have 4 color scheme. Anybody that's used Preseem in the past knows that our previously just had a 3 color scheme. essentially what we've done with this is we've tried to set a range that shows you that sweet spot that I mentioned earlier, where the network is busy, but the customers are still happy. So if we take an access point in example, if you have a critical access point score, that means you're probably getting support calls already. You probably, maybe you're getting some churn, you probably, negative reviews, all the bad things that comes with a poor experience. If it's in the yellow band, you're kind of on the edge of the good experience. You probably don't want to add any more subscribers there, or you want to split and add capacity. And this new blue range is really exactly where you want to be, right? It's customers are happy, you're still delivering a good experience, but you're quite loaded. And then green is, well, you've got a whole bunch of capacity there, sell more, market in that area, all that kind of stuff. And you'll see when Jeremy goes into the demo in a couple minutes that all of the scores are colored by these three. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at the individual scores. So that's my whirlwind overview of Preseem at a high level. Essentially, we measure, optimize the QoE, give you tools to identify the problems in the network. And this new layer of RF analysis that we just launched is really, really powerful to enable you to be proactive on the RF layer so that the subscriber traffic QoE metrics never get to the state that a customer's having problems. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy to do a short demo.
Thanks, Dan. I will share my screen here in a second. Before we leave that section of the presentation, though, I thought maybe we'd want to answer one question that hit in the Q&A. We've got a slide for this. The question was, where does the Preseem hardware go in the network? Dan, do you want to just say where that is briefly before I do the demo?
Yeah, so there's two things we deploy. So one is the software, which is the Preseem Polar, which is, you think of that as kind of like an NMS polar, right? Like we're reaching out into all the network elements, collecting a whole bunch of information. And then the other one is the inline element, which does the traffic optimization and extracts the QE metrics. Really, the only constraint is we need to see the traffic in both directions. So that's really what ends up driving the placement there. We have several different hardware options depending on how much throughput you need and where you need it, but that's the real constraint. Basically, you want to go to the first point in the network where all the traffic in both directions goes through the same spot. And the reason for that is we take very fine-grained timings between packets. So if those were to be in separate boxes, it would not be possible for us to measure latency with the accuracy that we do today.
Thanks, Dan. Okay. Share my screen here. So we'll quickly go through those 5 scores that Dan mentioned. So if those of you who are familiar with the Preseem interface before, you can see that we've added a new section on the left. So all the inline QoE metrics, measuring latency and loss, those are all present in the wireless and Explorer sections of the network, of the Preseem app. And we've added a new one where we're going to be adding over time more different types of network elements. And we've started with the RF layer. So CPE radios is kind of our general term for anything that would qualify as equipment that goes at a customer premise. So in the LTE world, that might be a UE. We've got subscriber modules in the Cambium world. We're just calling those all CPEs as a universal identifier. So we start out with a list view here where we have some KPIs, some key performance indicators that we can look at. And again, we've got this kind of a summary here at the top of these 5 colors that the 4 colors that Dan mentioned. We also have an unknown status where we don't have the status of the item. So you notice that most of these in this network, this is a real live network, most of these radios are in the blue. That's exactly what we want to be seeing. That means that the operator is optimizing for a return on their investment. But let's take a look at some of the critical stuff and see what that looks like in detail. Notice we've got we can sort by any of these columns here, up and down, backwards, we can filter, etc. So let's just take a look at RF critical. So this would be users that have a worse than expected RF performance. So we'll grab one of these here just at random. Let's take a look at this user in detail. So yes, immediately we can see that their RF score is in the red. Their RF efficiency is very poor. And consequently, we're also getting a pretty low business value score. We'll get to that in a minute. As Dan mentioned, the business value score incorporates user behavior as well. But if we just look at the network itself, we're going to be looking at RF efficiency and stability. I don't see a flag for interference, so very likely this is just a poor signal level rather than interference. We can also see some additional stats on this, how much the user's been using, what their current link rates are, that sort of thing. If we go over to the metrics tab, we'll get even greater detail here. We can see, for example, how poorly they've been scoring in this RF efficiency. Yeah, over the past day, it's been quite bad here. And we'll note that we're really seeing a low link rate, and notice this is very jittery as well. That's going to cause a problem in just the overall stability of the link. And we're going to be taking that into account in that score. We still have all of the original, you think of them as the raw metrics or the manufacturer's metrics as well, from these radios. So, we'll show you the noise level, the signal to noise ratios, packets per second, all the graphs that you would expect to see. But we do have those organized here in this picker, so that ideally you're not spending a lot of time looking at graphs that you don't need to see. Again, as Dan said, we're keeping 2 years of metrics. You can go back in time and look at those as well. So to go back to the list again, it's by simply sorting by the column that you wish to take action on, whether that's more proactively, just looking at the RF itself, or whether that is on the business value side, you're gonna find immediately the users that you need to take action on. Let's sort by business value. Fortunately, there's only about 16 really critical business value users. So again, these are users that are causing a big impact on the rest of the customers on that access point. So in a shared environment, in fact, we even have some that have gone to the negative here. Let's grab one of these low ones and take a look at Linda here. So again, we have RF efficiency is very poor. They're using a lot of airtime. RF performance is poor. We can see that they've been transferring some data here, and yeah, notice this link rate just tanked. Something went wrong with this radio. I don't know if there was a storm, maybe something happened in this. All of a sudden, previously this user had a couple hundred megabits link rate on that radio, and now it's dropped down to 50 megabits a second. Again, your operators, your support staff don't need to know any of these technical details. All they need to know is that score and what these diagnostics are telling us needs to happen in terms of remediation. We can see immediately, yes, this user, we've got to fix this user, or we're going to be running out of airtime on that access point. With that, let's move over to access points themselves. So we've looked at CPE radios, individual users, and for the most part, where we can tell you, is the RF healthy? Is the impact that they're having on the network healthy? Then at the access point level, we can take a look at which access points as a whole are experiencing trouble. So we've added in, we have one extra card here. We still have the RF score. So if we want to be proactive and just look at, what are our worst performing access points, these access points they're not actually very heavily loaded. So while they have a bad RF score, the health score is still okay. So you don't necessarily need to take an action immediately on these. Because of that, where we were incorporating user behavior and the RF conditions, we would be looking at things like, let's take a look at our most serious APs, looking at our health score here. So in this case, the RF isn't actually that bad on these, but utilization is going to be really heavy. And that's the case here. Notice if we look at our airtime remaining, we can see that all of these are in the red on the airtime. Let's dig into one of those. Our subscriber capacity is also low. That's that third value here. So notice we're getting a warning on the total number of radios that we have attached to this. So maybe we're overloading this one a little bit. This one says we have 30. That's probably a little more than we would want to have on this particular type of radio with this channel width. It's a CPE P1000. It's pretty old radio. And consequently, notice our available subscriber capacity has really dropped in the past 2 weeks. There's really not any airtime remaining to speak of on this radio. Similarly, we can jump right to, let's take a look at the connections here for this access point. If we want to see, okay, well, now that we know that the access point's having trouble, well, which users do we need to take action on? And we can see that out of these 30, a lot of these are really healthy. They're in the blue. They're really not too bad. But what's going to happen is these down here that are in the warning and critical stages, notice, again, these have much worse RF than the others, and they've also got some heavy usage. So if we were going to try to decide, well, let's fix this access point by just moving a few users or remediating a few users, now we can immediately see which users do we need to take action on in order to improve the quality of experience for everybody on that access point. Because these users here with the worst business value scores, they are taking more than their fair share of airtime. As Dan said, what you actually sell is airtime. Again, we've got our same metrics still available for all of these. Airtime utilization, airtime remaining. We've got our performance metrics. Looks like our airtime available is really dropping. Link rates holding okay, holding steady. And airtime utilization, as we said, was having some issues there. So we still have our latency metrics as well. The experience tab, the same things that you'd be used to seeing in the rest of it, and we can see that yeah, we do have some overall latency isn't too bad on this access point, but there are some users that are having really high latency, and they're definitely going to be noticing that. You can see it's up here in the up at the top of the graph. Those are the worst. There's the worst latency on this segment. So we can see that definitely there's some actions that could be taken to make that improve. And we'll go back to our access point subscriber capacity. Most of these are fairly healthy. Again, the green ones, these are ones we've got plenty of airtime remaining, good opportunities to go sell some more. And then we've got some that are in the warning state where we're really beginning to run out of airtime. Notice there's just a few subscriber count, just a few remaining there. And then lastly, of course, we've got those critical ones where there really is very little airtime remaining. In some of these cases, we're saying, you've got 80 subscribers on this access point. You have about 13 too many. You might want to remove some to improve the quality of experience for everybody else. So that's it in a nutshell. The first 5 scores that are part of our RF. We've taken you through the lists where you can filter and sort at your heart's content, find some really, really cool, interesting facts about your operational network. And ideally iterate through every couple of weeks and begin to improve things. So I'm going to stop sharing now so we can go back to the deck and Dan and start taking some of your questions.
The first question we have is mine is a greenfield WISP. I want to know if Preseem allows to configure certain traffic to have priority and hence lower latency. For example, subscribers into day trading are worried about delays in placing orders. So we very consciously do not do traffic identification. And the reason for that is we believe that modern AQM techniques like we leverage just really don't make that necessary anymore. You no longer need to do that kind of stuff to deliver a good experience. So what will happen with the way that our traffic management applies that is those day trading things will be very light flows, which means they will be automatically considered interactive, which means they're automatically going to get first shot at the bandwidth. And you don't have to configure any rules to try to identify specific types of traffic or specific destinations to say get high priority. And in practice, this just solves 99% of the problem with 10% of the complexity. So I don't think you need to have that to have that ability to prioritize a particular application. In that individual case, it might be really hard anyway, because some of those day trading apps are probably a protocol that's not seen very often, and any DPI software may just not have the ability to identify that specific application anyway, especially if it's pretty niche. Next question is when it will be available. So it is available now. We are rolling it out a bit slowly though. So we have, I'm not sure how many now it is, 20 odd some customers using all the new scores now, just from the standpoint of kind of giving everybody a good experience and make sure we can work through the training and everything. We're enabling it a few a week, well, maybe 10 or something a week for customers over the next while. At some point, we'll open it wide, kind of for the floodgates. But in the meantime, we do have a way. You just let us know. We'll kind of put you on the list, and we're working through them as quickly as we can. But we really didn't want to just turn it on for all the hundreds of customers at once and then not be able to give everybody the amount of attention they need to really get trained up and be successful. So we're rate limiting the onboarding a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, that training. And Dave is also asking that as well. When can you see it in your Preseem deployment? Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like going, if you are an existing customer, for example, because it sounds like Dave is.
Yeah, so if you're existing customer, it's just that kind of queue we have going of trying to get as many people done as quickly as we can. Once we flip a bit, it basically just shows up in the UI. So we'll start collecting the data ahead of time so that we have a decent amount of history. The scores, Jeremy can talk to this better than I can anyway, but the scores require a certain amount of history to be accurate. So if we turn it on one day, you won't have scores that are really useful for at least 7 days, or maybe a little bit farther, because they really do need that history. So typically we'll reach out, we'll do a kind of a version of this, a demo, explain what's going on, explain all the logistics and pricing and all that stuff, and then we'll turn it on, collect data for 7 days, give you access, and then away you go after that. So we are going to try to get through as many people as quickly as we can. It's painful to slow this down, but it's necessary that we give everybody a good experience. So.
And Eden is asking, can you look back in time and look at the scores to see how the radios were performing? Yes, absolutely, Eden. I'll show you on the screen again here. So we took a look at, the default overview is giving you a fixed time window of the last 2 weeks. As Dan said, that is essentially the window in which we think you should be deciding on whether to take an action. One little change from day to day, not actionable, but over a longer period of time, absolutely. So we do, however, keep all of these metrics. And if we go back to the metrics tab, we can go take a look at the performance there. We should have our, the summary tab here for these scores. And we can turn on, let's just go take a look at like the last month. I believe we have, so now minus 30 days. For this particular customer, and we should have some data leading back there. So we have those scores. We'll keep those scores as long as we're keeping the raw data as well, which right now we're committing to a two-year commitment on that, Eden. So yeah, we should be able to give you everything you need in terms of a history. And I think Dave has got a question about pricing. Dan, you want to handle that slide?
Yes. So there is the way what we've done in concert with this is we're introducing 2 different tiers of Preseem. So there's Essentials, which adds in all of the new CPE radio metrics, the 2-year metric retention, RF metrics for every AP and every CPE radio. And then there's Plus as well, which is where all the scores and the analytics roll into. So I can just jump over. This is all on the website if you want to go take a look at it. Essentially, yeah, the breakdown of the 2 different tiers is here. Again, Essentials, basically think of it as what you have today. If you're a Preseem customer, all the inline metrics, QE metrics, but adding on CPE radio metrics and the 2-year retention, and then the Plus is the scores, and the pricing's here as well. But yeah, that's all available on the website. And basically everybody that's opting in, kind of the first thing we do is we're going through all of the logistics and the pricing and all that stuff, and then turn it on. And you have 15 days to try the new scores and the CPE radio features. If you like them, great. And if you don't, you just stay on the current pricing and the current feature set that you have.
Okay, no new ones have come in for a minute, but please feel free to ask your additional questions. We have a little bit more time. Sorry, Dan, were you going to say something?
Yes, maybe it's fun if we got a couple extra minutes to do the inverse. Go look at a good one instead of bad ones.
Absolutely. The vast majority of them are going to be good, so that's much less interesting. But yeah, absolutely. In a well-run network, yeah, a lot of them are going to be good. So let's take a look at just some good RF here. There we go. There we go. It looks like we had a little bit of a downturn. I wonder if maybe there was a storm or something recently, but overall, this user's been doing pretty well. Let's take a look at that RF side. Let's take a look at the radio here. And let's go give this a little bit longer of a window. This one's moving a little slow right now. There we go. Yeah, there has been a little recent reduction, but overall you can see that this reference line here, you may be familiar with that. That's showing you, well, this is sort of the expected rate for this link, and in general, this user's been doing a little bit better. It does look like it's dropped off recently, so I would expect to see that score start to drop over the next couple of weeks as this history moves in. Yep, there we go. Link rate imbalance is pretty good. Modulations, as you can see, modulation's begun to drop a little bit. That informs the rate. Overall, this user's doing okay though, holding steady.
Cool. So Tyson, sorry, is asking about the pricing again. So yeah, the Essentials is a little bit more expensive than the existing Classic, and Plus is more on top of that. It's not quite double, but it's more. So the reason for that is what we're trying to accomplish there, I guess, is Essentials gives you the tools to investigate all the QoE problems in your network on RF level, but it requires time because you're going to have to look at a lot of charts and still saves you time having to go into different vendor tools. Like if you're Ubiquiti and Cambium, you have it all in one place. But where the value of the scores come in is really saving a lot of time for people that are trying to be proactive in the RF network. It takes an enormous amount of time to look at every AP every day, or look at it, even if you could think about it, looking at every CPE radio to find the troublesome ones. And that's what we're trying to solve with Plus. So for people that maybe don't have huge networks, it could be that the Plus, I think it still is going to save a lot of time, but it's not as much of a savings as if you have a huge network and it's just simply impossible to actually look at these things every day. But yes, it is more expensive.
We've got a couple questions. Again, another one from Eden. Eden's asking about real-time analysis. So let's talk about that briefly. In fact, I'll go back to this feature slide here. So the scores and the diagnostics are intended to be your slow, what's the word? Your slow processes. I like to think of it as if we were looking at our iteration. Sorry, let me scroll back here. My mouse did a little weird thing. If we were in this loop here, where we're doing this continuous improvement, there's going to be a rhythm for your particular company. I would anticipate that something on the order of a couple of weeks, in which case I would expect that you're doing a kind of an in-depth analysis looking at your scores at least twice a month, where you're planning out, here's the work that we're going to do for the next 2 weeks. And in addition to that, you're planning your capacity upgrades, things that are on the 6 months and year time frame, or in some case 18-month time frame. So currently, to go back to that feature list again, the scores and diagnostics are we're loading them into the web UI in real time, but currently they're being calculated once a day for the previous day. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you have to look at an entire day to really know what happened during that day in terms of the overall ups and downs. But the other is that we're still scaling this up. So we're calculating at 15-minute intervals, and our goal is to eventually get that down to like at least an hour, where you could still get a score or a diagnostic reading at the level of that kind of granularity, 15 minutes or an hour. It's not necessarily actionable at the level of 15 minutes or an hour. What we do have for you, though, is all of the raw metrics coming in once a minute, and that's essentially real time, to answer Eden's question on the real-time question. So if you got an operator in the field and they're re-aiming the antenna and you're trying to determine, have they made an improvement, you'd see that link rate move pretty quickly. That's happening pretty quickly.
And the distinction there is that that's based, again, just on the raw metrics that we're reading versus all the math that goes into the building
Correct.
the performance models and stuff, which is run on a coarser granularity.
Absolutely. So in answer, the analytics don't really make sense at real time. You can't really take action on them in the same way. That's a fine goal, but it's not really important in terms of that iterative cycle. And it looks like Tyson's got a question about the API. Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we maybe missed one on the Sonar stuff in there. So the new scores are not yet exposed by an API. They will be. When it is, then Sonar and other providers could make use of that and pull that into their UIs. But we have not exposed these via an API yet. Sorry, if there's a question there, some of the individual metrics. Do you want to jump to that first, Jeremy? We'll just take all these in order.
I can. Tyson didn't ask which one specifically, so I wasn't sure exactly what more we would show, but
maybe just a couple, like the panels for CPE radios, just the
sure.
type of information we have in the raw metrics there.
Absolutely. Can do that. Let's go get one. Let's take, I'll just take one at random here. Let's see here. Let's get some hardware. Let's get some examples of hardware. Okay, there's a PMP 450. This looks like mostly Cambium, but there's some ubiquity here. I'll grab a ubiquity this time for fun. Let's take a, let's go ubiquity. And let's grab, here we go, Power Beam. So the summary is going to look essentially, this overview is going to look the same no matter what model you're talking about. This is basically, here's the raw things you need to kind of make a decision. Are you going to take an action on this? In terms of the detailed metrics, we capture pretty much everything there is to know about these access points that's of any value. If we want to talk about the Cambium, the ubiquity specific metrics, we've got those as well. We should have the AMC, CCQ, we've got link rates, we've got all the port statistics, we've got, CPU and memory utilization, we've got whether, faults, packets per second, noise, signal, modulation rate, pretty much the same metrics that you'd find in a vendor-specific tool. We're going to make sure that you have access to those here, so you don't need to go take an additional look at additional tools. So it doesn't look like we're getting airtime utilization for that one. Not sure why, but we can certainly dig into that. Any other metrics you want me to show, Dan?
Probably okay for now.
Okay.
So Anthony has a question about the value prop. So this is really important, right? So one of the value props is churn. So certainly if reducing churn is a good thing. It sounds like you don't have very much churn at the moment. But the other ones are, if the more proactive you are, the less support you're going to have. Deliver better experience, people are going to call less. But with the new features as well, being able to identify which CPE radios are taking the most airtime, this really comes down to adding capacity to your network. If you go to an individual access point and you fix all of those people with the bad business value score, you're freeing up airtime that's going to allow you to sell more on that same equipment. So the business case isn't just around churn, it's also being able to sell more on your existing equipment as well. So it's hard for us to quantify that, for everybody, because people spend different amounts on hardware, they have different ratios of subscribers they put on APs, but it can be very material. Jeremy did a blog post last spring talking about what happens when you have poor modulations. And you can have single subscribers taking 30% of the airtime on an AP. Like if you can identify those people and fix them, you can very materially change how much you can sell on particular sites. The catch on the subscriber plan assurance. That's great. So someone's paying attention to the table. That's awesome. So this is a feature that we hoped to get launched with everything else right now, but we weren't able to get it done quite in time. So it's all going to be part of Plus, but I'll let Jeremy talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good find. So subscriber plan assurance is, you can think of it as the flip side of the AP health. So if we think of the AP health, we can say, can we deliver what we're selling to the customer on the access point as a whole? Subscriber plan assurance lets you look at an individual subscriber and say, A, can I deliver the plan that I've sold them? And B, if I can deliver that and I've got some extra headroom, what kind of a plan can I upsell them on? We get asked this all the time from operators to say, okay, well, I want to increase my plan speeds, but how much more data are they going to use? What's the impact going to be on my network? Am I going to actually be able to deliver it with a good quality of experience? And that requires a good deal more number crunching. We do have the number crunching figured out. We just didn't have time to build that, as Dan said, prior to release. But because that is considered part of this release, that's listed as a feature, and that's coming soon. So we'll be able to tell you at that subscriber level, A, can you actually deliver the plan, and B, what kind of plans can you deliver? So you'll be able to ask these what-if scenario questions. Similarly, on the dashboard, if you have someone in sales wanting to know, okay, the customer calls in, let's say that they're a heavy user, they're a good candidate for a bigger plan, can we actually deliver them a bigger plan? And we're going to answer that for you right there in the user interface.
Next question, do you have metric integration on platforms other than Cambium and Ubiquity? So launch right now, it's Cambium, Ubiquity, and MikroTik. We do have plans in the short term to whittle down that list. We're talking to Toronto Super interesting. They don't quite expose things the way that we can get to easily yet, but we're starting to talk to them about that. The LTE vendors are probably next up. Can't say right this minute exactly which one's next, but Telrad
Well,
is definitely
Telrad would be
near
the
the top
first
of
of
the
the
list.
LTE. Yeah, Telrad's the first of the LTE vendors that we'll be tackling.
Yeah.
So look for those over the coming months as we work on those. We're not doing anything that's specific to a particular technology. It's a little bit more difficult to get the metrics out of LTE, but we'll make it work. And then there's a few others. Mimosa's in there. Radwin's probably in there. Some of those that you've seen perhaps in our fixed wireless report that are kind of at the lower end of the penetration scale, but still have an active user base. Tarana is definitely in the position, as Dan said, where we need them to actually let us have metrics, and they've been reluctant to do so. So if you are a Tarana customer or potential Tarana customer, please let them know that you want to see these features in Preseem as well, and we'll keep working on it from our side. That's kind of unusual. Most vendors don't put up any fuss at all and are happy to give to their operators. It's like, it's your equipment. You kind of own the metrics. You can do whatever you like with it. And Tarana hasn't taken that stance yet, which is a little bit different.
I think it's maybe a little less reluctance than they just kind of haven't gotten there yet. So
That's
we need to
entirely
have
possible,
a little
yeah.
bit of more customer interest drives features.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in our case, Tarana is still an emerging set. Obviously, there's lots of buzz around it, and we'd love to see that. But we excuse me, but we also have to take care of our existing customer base, as we pointed out. There's we want to chip away at those. Already, we have coverage for about 85% of what's out there in the field, and we expect to get that down to at least 95%, and probably higher over the next 6 months.